Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com, and welcome to another episode of The Gutters, my audio journal. It is Vacationapalooza, because I, in the last 2 months, have taken 2 week-long vacations, and I'm here to brag about them. I mean, I'm here to tell you about what I did. Just as a reference, so we can orient ourselves, today is Sunday, August 4th, 2019. And I'm going to be talking about stuff that I did back in June, because that's our first little trip. My wife and I decided that for our 50th birthdays, yes, you heard that correctly, 50th birthdays, of which she has not had hers yet. That's in a few days. But I did have mine back in December. But for our 50th birthdays, we had decided that we were going to treat ourselves to a trip to Edinburgh, Scotland. And mostly we did that because we had some built up miles on some card that we have, and we discovered that we were going to lose those miles if we didn't use them within a certain time period. And so we decided, we better take a trip. And that coupled with the fact that we got a nice refund from our taxes last year, we decided that we would go to another place that we've always wanted to go to, which is Scotland. Now we can only afford to go. Thankfully, speaking of afford, we were able to go on this trip because of those miles, flight miles that we earned. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do it at this time. But beyond that, just because of what we had saved up and from the refund, we could only go for 6 days? I think we were in Edinburgh for 6 days, and so I'm gonna talk about that, and then after that, I'll talk about the stuff we did in July, the week-long trip that we did in July. So first up, you fly over the Atlantic, and I think we figured out that from where we live, we were the travel time, not the total flight time, but the travel time, that includes, I think this number includes layovers at the airports, but 14 hours we figured. So first of all, we drove down to Boise, Idaho, where my daughter lives, and flew out of the Boise airport to start this trip. Partly because we needed someone to watch our dogs, which my daughter was somewhat gracious about. I'm kidding. She was very gracious about that. And I say that because she has 3 dogs and a cat of her own, and a nearly 2-year-old at that time. She turned 2 shortly after that trip. But so we drove down there, and the other reason was because we didn't want to pay for parking at the airport. So we parked our car at her house, and they took us to the airport. This was, I want to say we got up like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, all ready to go, and got to the airport and flew out about 6 or 7, I think it was, that first part of our trip. So the reason I'm telling you that part is because, we ended up landing in Edinburgh about 7 o'clock the next morning. I think that's right. So it must be 14 hours of actual flight time and not the layovers, because that's about 24 hours. So we're there 10. My math is wrong. This does not sound right. Anyway, all I know is we started early and we arrived early the next morning. So whatever that is, whatever that turns out to be, there's the time difference too. It's like an 8-hour time difference from where we live, something like that. Anyway, I'm sure that plays all into it. I'm not a scientist, guys. All right. I'm not a time scientist. Anyway, so we got there, arrived in Edinburgh, have no idea where we're going, what we're doing. I mean, that's not true, but, you're trying to orient yourself. The first thing that we do is we go find the tram to take from the airport to Edinburgh. And we see the tram, we see these kiosks, we're trying to figure out because we're dumb. But this very nice Scottish gentleman walked up to us and said, basically, how can I help you? And he was very helpful, told us what to do. And so we were able to get on the tram and sit down and enjoy the scenery, which is why I decided to take the tram instead of a taxi or the bus. So it took another, 20, 25 minutes to get to where we needed to be, which was Prince's Street. And we get off there and pull out my wife pulls out her phone to use Google Maps because we're walking to our hotel, which is on the Royal Mile, which is this long stretch. It's about a mile and 1.6 miles or one point something miles. I don't know what it is. So it's a bit longer than an actual mile, but they call it the Royal Mile. It's the mile, long road that connects Edinburgh Castle to Holyrood Palace, which is at the other end. And so like I said, we were staying at a hotel, a budget hotel that was recommended to us by a friend of ours at work that has gone to Scotland several times. And so we were trying to find our way there. And like I said, she pulled out her phone to look it up. So we start walking, and we walk a little bit, and then we're walking by this thing that's like stretching way up into the sky. And it's some sort of monument, right? I have no idea what this is, but it looks beautiful. But my wife is just like, she's so, oh, and by the way, I wanted to have her come on the show here and talk about this vacation. And I was trying to convince her to do that, and to no avail, which is partly why this episode has been so long. Plus I was, we were just exhausted by the time I get back, but I'm jumping ahead. Anyway, so she's very determined to figure out where we're going, and she's really tired. She wants to get and hot because while the temperatures while we were there were in the mid to upper 60s, as you're walking around with a 30-pound suitcase on your back, we have these little, not little, we have these suitcases that have straps where they can be like these huge backpacks. And it's probably more than 30 pounds. It's probably more like 50 pounds. I think she said she weighed it once and it was like 50 some pounds. Anyway, so, she's hot, she's tired, and walking around with all this weight on her back. So she's really determined. She's really focused. And at one point, I kind of stop and I look up at this monument, which turned out to be the Scott Monument. And I said, Kitra. And she stopped and turned around and said, what? And I said, look, we're here. Anyway, so we do eventually find our hotel, and this is a theme here because the people that we encountered in Scotland were very gracious, very helpful, very friendly. Long story short, I highly recommend you go to Edinburgh because they're great. But we got to the hotel and it was too early to check in. But they offered, we were going to ask, but they offered, to let us store our bags there until check-in time, which that was fantastic. And so we did that, headed on out because, the thing to do when you're traveling internationally like this, especially when you have an overnight flight like we did and you arrive the next morning, all the advice that we've ever received is do not take a nap. Don't sleep. Just get going so that your body readjusts to the new time, the new time that you're in. And so we did that when we went to Dublin, Ireland, some years ago, and it worked out really well. Well, sort of. I basically was falling asleep as we sat in a restaurant, this little French restaurant that we tried in Dublin, as Kitra was talking to me. So I was determined not to duplicate that experience. So I tried really hard to sleep on the plane, and I'm going to go back and forth. Sorry about that. Tried really hard to sleep on the plane more, which I have a hard time to doing anyway. But I did manage to sleep a little bit. So this time when we were in Edinburgh, I did not fall asleep while I was sitting there. But we basically headed up the Royal Mile and walked up to the Edinburgh Castle. On the way down back from Edinburgh Castle, there's this little tourist attraction called the Camera Obscura, which is this. How do you describe? Well, you should look it up, but it's a bunch of different visual oddities in what is it, 5 or 6 levels of this building, and near the top, or no, I guess it was at the top. At the top of the building is this little room that you can go in. It fits 20, 25 people, and they have this. It's like a pinhole camera at the top of this building, and then there's this little disc in the middle of the room that projects a mirrored picture of stuff going on down the street. So the light hits the mirror. The mirror is pointed down at the street. The light hits the mirror, projects that into this tube, I guess, anyway, we were able to see people down below. So if you're ever in Edinburgh and you're walking around Edinburgh, outside of Edinburgh Castle, that area, more than likely someone is spying on you. So just beware of that. Anyway, we did. And it basically walked down. We checked into our hotel, and then we had a very late lunch at a restaurant nearby. And this is my first experience having a Scottish pie, which is basically a bunch of meat and vegetables kind of mushed into a pastry. And in this case, it was some brown gravy poured over it, and it was delicious. It wasn't as delicious as some other things that we had there, but I was happy because I was eating traditional Scottish fare. So then we went to tour a cathedral, St. Giles Cathedral, which is this big cathedral in Edinburgh. I have to say the stained glass and ornamentation, the beautification stuff inside. Well, I've already spoiled it. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful. Stained glass is just something that I'm just impressed by. The artistry that goes into that. I can't fathom how someone creates that stuff and puts it together. I guess I need to watch a documentary or something about this, because every time I've gone into a cathedral or an old church that has stained glass, I'm just really impressed by the craftsmanship. Let's see here. Later we just kind of shopped for some personal items, and we bought dessert from this little bakery not too far away from our hotel called Mimi's. I had this wonderful, those they're kind of like Oreos, only so they're like cream-filled vanilla flavored cookies. So they're kind of like Oreos. Anyway, they had a bar, kind of like a cookie bar type thing that tasted just like those vanilla cream cookies, and I loved it. And then we were done. That was day one. We were tired, but we had to get our rest, because the next day we were going. Our plan was to go to and tour Edinburgh Castle that day, and that took a good part of the day. But first, our hotel had we bought the breakfast package, which means we could have breakfast there every day, which we regretted. I suggest you don't do that if you can afford it. That is, and just go to the restaurants in the area and experience what they have to offer. However, our hotel offered what I refer to as a traditional Scottish breakfast. You got your rashers, your sausages. They had the kind of like the McDonald's hash browns, tomatoes, mushrooms, pork and beans. And I know some people are probably listening to this and going, ew, no, it's great. I love it. I love that. Since Dublin again, when I had a traditional Irish breakfast, which also included blood sausage, which this hotel did not offer, unfortunately. I've loved your English, Scottish, Irish traditional breakfasts. So anyway, so we had that three times while we were there. Other times we had breakfast elsewhere. So we went to Edinburgh Castle, and this is the castle. If you go look at this online, it's the castle up on a hill. It's virtually it's well protected because of its location, and I think it's only been overrun once in the history. I'm probably wrong about that. Don't quote me on this stuff. Anyway, when we first got there was this nice gentleman who was doing these walking tours, and so he walked us around and gave us some history and some context for the buildings and the areas that we were walking through. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then we were where we stopped. There was one part where you can walk through and see the crown jewels and the Stone of Scone, which is this big stone, kind of rectangular stone that the kings and queens of England sit on when they're crowned king and queen. So that's really cool. That was probably the coolest thing of the crown jewels. That was the coolest thing in that room, I thought, even more than the sword and the crown or whatever that hat thing was. We walked through this teeny tiny room. It was the birth room of, I think, James IV of Scotland. Anyway, I just, what we were told was that James's mother, that's where she had James, birthed James, and then was nursing him and stuff in that room for a while. My memory's fuzzy now. It's been almost 2 months since we went to Scotland. But it was tiny, like I want to say 10 square feet, but I think that's generous. It was I'm just impressed that people lived in that way, or had to, in some cases had to live in those circumstances. But other than that, there was a bunch of military museums at Edinburgh Castle that we went through, which was kind of neat to see. Prisoner cells are probably more impressive, just because you get a feel for what they had to go through, only without the smell. Oh, that was the other thing. I was gonna call this episode Old Reeky when I was originally going to release it when I just talking about Scotland. But since I'm doing both, I'm not going to do that. But they called Edinburgh Old Reeky because of the smell of the city. So in its time, it was one of the most modern cities in the world. They had what were considered then skyscrapers, and just the advancements in engineering and stuff, stuff like that came out of Scotland, right? But it was filled with so many people, and before indoor plumbing and all that kind of stuff. So I heard this a couple of times. Once on a Rick Steves episode about Edinburgh, but also from a tour guide. I don't know if it was this gentleman that I referred to earlier, or if it was somebody else, but no, it was another tour that we did later. But people, it was so dark in some of the living areas that people couldn't necessarily see your neighbor, but you could smell him. And that's how Edinburgh became known as Old Reeky. Anyway, so let's see here. What did we do? So like I said, we walked around and looked at stuff. And then there was the 1 o'clock gun. We got to see that being fired, and so you should take a look. Go search that on YouTube, and you can see what that is. But man, so basically it's just this gun that they fire at 1 o'clock, I think, every day, maybe except Sundays. Not really sure on that, but anyway, we were there. I was gonna record it on my phone, and I messed up the timing, which is a good thing, because I probably would have dropped my phone, because once it fired, it was really loud, very, very loud. But, curiously enough though, I think I only heard that gun go off once, other than the time we were there. Granted, there were a couple of days where we were out of town, but I guess we were busy inside, or I don't know, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's not as loud when you're down in the city, away from the castle, but it was really loud. After that, in the afternoon, we had bought tickets for a hop-on, hop-off bus tour of the city. So basically, you buy this ticket and you can get on the bus at various locations, and you can get off at any point, at any of the stop points, and then get back on if you want. And that lasts all day. I think it's 24 hours. You can use that ticket. But we used it for two reasons. One, we wanted to see more of the city, without having to walk through it. And two, we really needed just to rest. Cause we did a lot of walking. And then we did, near Edinburgh Castle, there's this thing called the Scotch Whiskey Experience. Now, when you go to Dublin or Ireland in general, they're well known for their Guinness, their beer, which is very good. One of my favorites. But you go to Scotland and they're more known for their whiskey. And so I wanted to try some Scotch whiskey. And there's this place, like I said, Scotch Whiskey Experience, where you can go in. It's really kind of kitschy, but it's cute. You go in, buy your ticket, which includes a tasting. But really, the whole beginning of it is, so that's at the end. At the beginning is basically, this is how whiskey is made in Scotland. And you get in this little, it looks sort of like a whiskey barrel, and you sit down, and it kind of like in a Disney-esque style, motors you through various things you're seeing and hearing. And so you get to learn how whiskey is made, and, what the different kinds of Scotch there are, because the different areas produce different styles of Scotch. Oh, I should say whiskey. Sorry. Anyway, so at the end we got to try some. I ended up trying a blended whiskey, and Kitra tried a single malt from the Speyside area, which I think, boy, memory. So don't hold me to this, but I think this is in the southwest area of Scotland, I think. Anyway, I much preferred my blended whiskey over the single malt, but to each their own. We ended our night after a dinner. I had fish and chips. The first time I had fish and chips over there. No, okay, never mind. I'm jumping ahead. There's another story about fish and chips. We ended the night with a literary pub tour that started at the Belhaven, I think is the restaurant name. No, the Beehive is where that's where we were. Anyway, this was a couple actors who tell you about, much like the Malt Disney Whiskey Experience. They tell you about the rich literary history of coming out of Scotland. And that was really interesting. We learned a lot of things, such as the story of Jekyll and Hyde. So apparently, it's not pronounced Jekyll as we in America do quite commonly. It is pronounced Jekyll and Hyde. So I thought that was really cool. But anyway, it was a really nice tour. Along the way, it's a literary pub tour, so we got to stop at 2 or 3 pubs. And I ended up having, because I like beer, I ended up having, I think, as a Belhaven Best beer, which is I kind of thought of as a light version of Guinness, and we had some ciders too, which was good. So that was nice. And I'll tell you what, the drinks there, pretty cheap in comparison to going to an American pub, where I am used to spending $5, $6, $7 on a pint. And a pint there was, I don't know, 3, 4 Scottish pounds, something like that. I mean, with the currency difference. Maybe it's about the same, but I felt like it was cheaper. Anyway, so that was day 2. Day 3, this was a big one. This, one of the reasons we ever wanted to go to Scotland was to go to the Scottish Highlands. We had this romantic notion about the Highlands, quite frankly, from movies, Highlander and Braveheart and things like that. Rob Roy. So we boarded this little bus, had Douglas, our tour guide, who was dressed in a kilt as well, along with many of his other tour guides. And by the way, this was through Robbie's Tours, and which came recommended to us, and I'm recommending them to you. So if you're ever going over to Edinburgh, Scotland, and you want to do some day tours like we did, I highly recommend Robbie's. Don't take like the big bus tours, cause that's like dozens of people on there, and take the smaller tours. Those are much better. And, we did 2 tours. One was the Highlands, another one I'll talk about here in a bit. But, both of them we took through Robbie's. Both the tour guides were awesome. And we learned a lot of history on that tour, because Douglas, he liked to talk. And basically he told us all that stuff that we know about Scottish history is crap. As they say, history is written by the winners. So there's a lot of, I'll say, influence by outside forces that have written the history of Scotland. And we got to learn quite a lot about that stuff. Such as, for example, the image of the Highland warrior, in the kilt with like the blue paint on their face, like in Braveheart. No, not at all. William Wallace, didn't wear a kilt. He wasn't a kilt wearer. He was a brilliant military strategist. We got to see at one point there was, I've forgotten the name, but there was a battle area where Douglas told us about that battle and what Wallace did there. Also, speaking of Braveheart, Wallace is not Braveheart at least to Douglas, and according to Douglas, to the Scottish people. So, Braveheart is actually Robert the Bruce. And Douglas made a connection between, was it Robert the Bruce or was it Wallace? I forget now. To the legend of Maid Marian and Robin Hood. I think it was Wallace. Anyway, he made a very compelling argument, I have to say. Let's see here. So we did the tour, through the beautiful, mountains of, the Highland and fields of the Highlands, the Scottish Highlands. All I could say, it was beautiful. I would love to go back. We stopped at a few places where we saw people getting out and walking on these trails, and you can just, there's a lot of walking trails out there. And, my wife doesn't like to do hiking, but she said that even she wanted to go and do some walking around in the Highlands. Beautiful stuff. I'm going to, for the post on the website that I'm going to throw in a few pictures from this trip. I think I'm going to have to go through and find some representative ones so you can see what I'm talking about. But, you could just get on Instagram or whatever, and see a bunch of that stuff. Just search for, Scottish Highlands and you can see that stuff. But, while I did take some pictures with my phone, speaking of Instagram, I didn't take a whole lot. We have a little digital camera that we were using, and I use that mostly. So I didn't have a lot of pictures on my phone to be able to post. So, maybe I should just do that. Anyway, beautiful place. If you ever have a chance to go through there, I would love to spend more time there. We did, speaking of, the Highlands, and I mentioned Highlander earlier, which is one of my favorite films of all time. Douglas did point out a few places where they filmed scenes, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that scene. I knew this area. So, that was cool. Kitra also, got to see a few places where, what's that show? Outlander? Yes, that one, where that was filmed. I got to see, a castle whose name I've forgotten already, where they filmed the scene with the French knights, in, that Monty Python movie the Holy Grail. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which was cool, which was also where they filmed. I believe this is the one where they also filmed some scenes for Outlander and for Game of Thrones. So, making use of these old, stone buildings and areas. So anyway, I will say, whenever we travel, I try to experience as much of the local cuisine as possible. And, one stop we made, there was this, bacon cheese, wrap. It was a wrap, but it was like it's kind of like, a puff pastry type thing. It was this flaky bread, but anyway, oh my God, that was so good. It's so tasty. I think I had breakfast before that, but then we got to this place and I saw this bacon cheese wrap. I'm like, I have to have that. So I had that too. So I had second breakfast. And then, for lunch, I had a sausage roll, which is basically the same thing with their sausage. I did not like that as much. As I have here in my notes, this would haunt me later. I had an upset stomach the rest of the day. We did, one of the things that we did want to do was to go to the World's End pub, which, if I think, most people would remember it from the movie, The World's End. I don't think that's the same place, as in that movie, which I thought it was at first, but, it is not. It is the World's End pub because at the time, back in the day, that's where the end of, was it the old city or was it the confines of the castle? Basically, if you went beyond that point, outside of there was the wilderness. That was where you were unprotected and all that stuff. So, it's just this tiny little pub on the corner of, near where our hotel was. And we wanted to go there. But when we arrived, they were full. They had no room at the inn. And so we had to settle for going back to the hotel, which they have their own restaurant, and we had a horrible dinner. It was horrible. So while I liked our hotel's breakfast foods, I did not care for the dinner. In other words, be flexible and be willing to have a couple places in mind. Don't do what we did, and plan on going to X place for dinner that night. So, we probably would have gone somewhere else. We were just so tired, so tired. All right. The next day, we got a late start because we were so tired. We slept in probably too long. But this is when we walked down to the other end of the Royal Mile to go to the Palace of Holyrood House, which is the Queen of England's residence when she's in Edinburgh. And so we got to walk around there, and there was this audio tour, and you got to see some really cool things. Then we went to the National Museum. I wanted to go to a museum. This was not the museum I turned out I wanted to go to. While it was really cool to see some stuff, we got to see a lot of Scottish historical artifacts. I really wanted to go to a museum that had a lot of historical art. And this was not the one. It was the other one that we didn't make it to. So I will be forever regretting that decision. Then apparently this day, looking at my notes, this was a lot of walking around, which probably wasn't a good idea considering how tired we were. But we went to a place called Calton Hill, which has some great sites, city sites, and it's also the location of what is called Edinburgh's Disgrace, which was a recreation, an unfinished recreation of in Greece there's this, I'm blanking on the name of it, the Parthenon, I think maybe that's the one. It was neat to see that. There's a couple other things there you can kind of walk around and see, but mostly it was the view. So it was almost a 360 degree wonderful view of Edinburgh and the surrounding area. So that was kind of neat. I did, whenever I travel, I try to stop at whatever comic book shop happens to be there. And while there were a few that I found, the only one that was basically within walking distance and that fit our itinerary was Forbidden Planet. So we actually did stop in there real quick. I looked around. I was trying to find some, locally made, locally produced comics, comics produced, by Scottish creators, published by, Scottish publishers. There were some things there, but I didn't, nothing that kind of caught my fancy, and I kind of regret that now. There were a couple things where I was like, I'll come back, in a few days and maybe get these. And then we never ended up going back. So, another regret, but, anyway, because we got started so late and all that walking around and touring stuff, again, we were tired. So we ended our short day 4 with, we did actually have dinner at World's End. And so this is where, we tried something new, both my wife and I. So I ended up getting a haggis and mash pie, which was really good. I've had haggis before made here in America when I went to a Robert Burns night celebration, which was not tasty. I did not care for it. But, if you go to Scotland, you gotta, just like with the whiskey, you gotta try the haggis, right? And I liked it. I don't know what people, local people would say about, the World's End pub haggis, but, I enjoyed it. And then Kitra had, I forget the dish, but it came with chips, fries. And our server, this wonderful gentleman, when he gave us the food, he said, would you like some vinegar? And Kitra gave him this look like, what? What are you talking about? And, he said, you gotta try it. And so he convinced her to try, put some malt vinegar on her fries or chips. And, so I tried that too. And we both loved it, to the point where when we got back, we went and next time we went and bought groceries, we bought some malt vinegar. And now every time we have fries or chips, I love to call them chips, but we here in America, chips are potato chips or crisps, I believe they're called, across the pond. And chips or fries there. So anyway, so we did that, and her chips were served with a side of mayo. And you may have heard about this, here in, America, where, those crazy people over there, eat their fries or chips, not with ketchup, but with mayo and malt vinegar. And I'll tell you what, it's delicious. And now I do that here because I love it. So. See what, if you go to new places and try new things, what you're exposed to, you end up liking things, right? I mean, that's what we tell our kids, right? You gotta at least try it. That's always been a rule in my house, with our kids, it may not look good. You may not even end up liking it, but you have to try it. You have to do it. All right. Day 5. We're almost coming to the end of our trip in Scotland. This was another day trip, however, not as long as the Scottish Highlands trip, which was, I think, about 8 hours. This was, 6 hours, I think. Anyway, this was, Kitra really wanted to go to, St. Andrews. And, which I ended up wanting to do too, because that's where the old course is, the St. Andrews golf course. But this was the Fife St. Andrews tour. And we ended up going through this, first, we stopped at this little seaside village called Ainster. We got out and, walked around a little bit and then walked out on the pier looking out at the, is that a bay or was that the actual ocean? I forget now, but we did that. It was nice. And then we went to St. Andrews. I got to, walk around the golf course a little bit. I did not get to play. We didn't have time to do that. That's one of those things that I would love to go do eventually. I'm sure I would piss off a lot of golfers because I'm so bad and slow. But anyway, I would love to do that. But I did before we left that area, I did step onto the course. So I've been on St. Andrews Golf Course, and I'm very happy about that. We did also, we had lunch at this place called Janetta's Gelateria, which was highly recommended by our tour guide, whose name, unfortunately, I have forgotten. He was wonderful, because he sounded like, if you're familiar with Outlander, he sounded like Jamie. The way he talked, the sound of his voice reminded me of Jamie. He was just this young, dude. He wasn't as talkative as Douglas on the Highlands tour, but, he was entertaining. And anyway, Janetta's, I think maybe the Robbie's and Janetta's has this, deal going on to steer people there, but it was very good. It was a good lunch, and they have great, gelato too. And then we kind of walked around St. Andrews. We got to see, we walked by St. Andrews University, which I would have loved to have gone to, like the library or something. We saw, St. Andrews Castle and Cathedral, the remnants of those things. We had got some great pictures of that. And later, so we did end up near the university. There's this one coffee shop that, Kitra and I noticed that had a sign, in the window basically saying, this is where Kate and, the one of the princes, I forget. My wife knows this backwards and forwards, and I have trouble remembering who is who in the royal family, but that's where they met. Apparently they met for coffee, and that's where they fell in love, supposedly. I don't know. I don't keep on this stuff. So I tried to convince Kitra to go into the coffee shop, so that she can say, yes, I was at the same place as them, but she didn't want to go for some reason. And then we stopped in this other village, a Falkland, I think, because we ended up walking through Falkland Palace. And basically you take this little tour, and you get to see how people, or at least hear and kind of see how people lived in, I think, the I want to say 1860s, but that might not be right. But I think at some point in the 19th century. how people in that area lived in that particular place. And then it was back to Edinburgh, and we had one of the places that we read about in our tour guides was this place called the Pie Maker. And so I like I said earlier, I had a meat pie. This was a bunch of different meat pies, and so we went there for dinner. We tried a couple different things. Again, apparently, mincemeat pastries, not my thing. So, that was kind of disappointing, unfortunately. The following day, the next to last day, the penultimate day in Edinburgh, we did another tour, this time in Edinburgh. It's called St. Mary's Close Underground Tour. And I have in my notes what time periods, and I don't remember now. But this is where I when I talked before about the name Old Reekie, this is where they had mentioned it. And so basically, you go in and they take you downstairs. Basically, Edinburgh was built up, and so whenever they wanted to build more space in Edinburgh, they would close off. And that's not why it's called a St. Mary's Close, but they would close off the top level and build on top of that. And so people basically were boxed in, and it was dark, and it was dank, and it was disgusting, quite frankly. I don't know how people survived, as they did. And many didn't, of course. There was a point where they took us into this room where they set up this display essentially where and talked about the plague as it came through Edinburgh. And so I can't even imagine what life, even though I've heard about it through this tour, I can't imagine what life would have been like. Then we were next on the agenda was Kitra. This is one of her things. She wanted to go tour her Her Majesty's yacht, the Britannia, which is parked there in Edinburgh and is available for touring. And so, since we didn't want to walk all the way down there because it was a bit of a ways away, we ended up hopping into a taxi and had this again the friendliness of the Scottish people in Edinburgh that we encountered. It was fantastic. He was talking to us, making jokes, and just getting to know us, which and we were getting to know him. And he kind of told us the story about this bar that had two doors, and you would go in. I forget now why, but it was really interesting that there were two entrances to this bar that were right next to each other. And I forget why it was, but it was really cool to hear. Anyway, so I highly recommend taking a taxi at some point. We did take another taxi, and that person wasn't as effusive, but still, you take your chances. But if you've had enough of walking, as we did, you can't go too wrong with taking a taxi. But anyway, we had we did tour the Britannia, which was nice. I've always liked taking tours on ships. When we went to Honolulu, Hawaii a few years ago, we went to Pearl Harbor, and there you can tour a couple, and you could tour I forget the name, but you can tour a ship, and then there's also a submarine as well that you can tour. And I always enjoy walking through ships like that for some reason. I don't know why. But that was nice. The dining room was just spectacular. Basically this is the Queen's home away from home as she was traveling. So, it was very, very posh. I'll just say, they took very good care of the Queen on that ship. Then we went back to the Royal Mile and did some shopping and rested a bit before we went to the Usher Hall Scottish Fiddle Orchestra concert. So this was an unplanned event. We were actually the night before, 2 nights before, we were wanting to go to a local pub where they had some traditional Scottish music playing, and in the course of looking for where to go and what they had to offer, because there was this website where you could go and look to see what was playing around the city. I found this fiddle orchestra concert and just read that to Kitcher, and she's like, "Well, let's go." So we went. We bought tickets, but while it was unplanned, it turned out to be one of the best things that we did. So another travel tip for you: keep your mind open for new experiences, even though you've already may have planned out your trip. Because not only was it lovely music, it was so moving to be among Scottish people in this environment. Because and I'll tell you one thing: I've gone to similar concerts where it's an orchestra type thing, and I much prefer the openness, the friendliness of the people in Scotland compared to those things in America. Because in America we basically kind of sit there and quietly appreciative until it's time to applause after a particular song is done. That's not what they do. They're clapping along, they're singing. It was a wonderful experience. Towards the end, before that, there was a couple times where they played some waltzes, and members of the orchestra who were not playing those particular pieces, they came out into the audience and invited the audience members to dance with them. And other people I noticed that were not dancing with the orchestra members, they, couples, especially older couples, they got up and they were dancing in the aisles. And that was amazing to see. If my wife and I danced, I would have done it myself. But I have 2 left feet, so I don't do that. But like I said, towards the end, they ended the night by playing Old Lang Syne, which, I think here in America, this is mostly a New Year's Eve thing that we sing, very briefly. But this, I think Auld Lang Syne is more to Scotland than that. I'll say of course, but I'm probably going to get this wrong. But I think it was written by Robert Burns. It's a poem that was written by Robert Burns that was then set to music later. But they were singing that song, the orchestra was playing that song. The audience was singing it. At one point, the whole thing started to speed up, and the audience members had already stood up while this song was being played. While they were singing it, they were holding hands together, which is another one of my regrets. I was just kind of standing there. I didn't know what was really going on at first, and at one point I looked over at the person on my right, and so they had their arms crossed and holding hands with their fellow concertgoers. And I noticed the woman on my right had her hand pointed towards me, and she was just doing the thing that everybody else was doing, but I wasn't holding her hand, like a stupid person, dumb American that I am, not participating. So another regret. I should have joined in, even though I didn't know what the hell was going on. But yeah, they were singing. They started swaying and going faster and faster with the music, and it was lovely. I hope my wife doesn't mind me saying this, but at the end of it, as the music stopped, I looked over at her. I had this huge smile on my face because I'm so happy that I was there to experience that, and she has tears coming down her face because she was so moved by the experience. So that was probably one of the best things that we did while we were in Edinburgh. So if you ever have a chance to go to something like that, I highly recommend that as well. And then finally, we ended our trip by basically hiking out of the city. I mean, it's not too far, but there's this place called Arthur's Seat, and it is the remnants of an old extinct volcano that you can hike up. I forget what the elevation is now, but it took us a good 2.5 hours to walk up to the top. And it's beautiful there. At one point near the beginning, there's all these trails that just go off the main one, and there's 2 or 3 different main trails you can take up there, I think, as I recall. But as we were going up one, I noticed there was this offshoot, and there was this building off to the left that I kind of saw over the top of the hill. So I told Kitra I'm going to run over there real quick. And it was just this remains of, I think, a chapel or something like that. But it's kind of neat to see. I took some pictures. Anyway, we ended up walking up there, and then you get to the top, and there's this little marker, for Arthur's Seat, and you can get up there. And I talked before about the 300, I think near 360 degree view of the city in the area, at the top of Calton's Hill. This was like 10 times better. You could see for miles. You could see some of the bends, the mountains in the distance outside of the city, and it was just spectacular. And windy. There's one point where I almost fell off the rocks that I was climbing up because it was so windy. But given as we were getting started on this walk, it was, again, I think it was like 68 degrees that day, and sunny. I don't think we had a rainy day in Edinburgh. There was a bit of rain on one of the trips, one of the day trips we took, but in the city, I don't think we had hardly anything. I mean, if we did, it was, it was the day we went to Holyrood Palace. There was a bit of rain there, but not much. It was good. It was good weather-wise trip. But anyway, so it was warm that day that we did that little hike. And by the time we get to the top, where it's significantly cooler, mostly because of the wind, but that was perfect because it really cooled us off. That was good. And then we went shopping. We had to do some shopping. We brought some stuff back for our family. So yeah, great trip. And the next day we got up and flew back. Speaking of that, so again, I will tout the wonderful nature of the Scots, because we were going through the airport, and I got through okay through airport security, but Kidra got stopped because she had a bag full of we bought these packs, these little whiskey taste, like 1 ounce bottles of whiskey that we were taking back for some family members. And we were told, the rule is they give us these little quart-sized plastic bags, and all liquids, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's whiskey or, bathroom accessories, all that kind of stuff, because here in America, we could, everything has to fit in like a 3 ounce bottle, but I don't think there's any restrictions on how many bottles you can take. Well, there's a restriction, when you're getting on a flight in Edinburgh to go out of the country for some reason. It'd be nice if, they would have that posted. Anyway, so, the guy was really cool. He said, he called me, Kidra called me over, and they're both explaining this to me. And we basically had to throw out every, shampoo and soap and all that kind of stuff that we brought with us. And then fit all of the whiskey that we had in these 2 plastic bags. Here's the funny bit about this, which we did. He was helping us. He was helping us stick the bottles in the bag and closing the bag up and all that kind of stuff. So he was very nice, very gracious about this, for us ignorant Americans who didn't know what we were doing there. And, the funny thing was, he told us everything that you're going to take that is liquid has to fit in these bags, but then you can take the bags right out, or take the stuff out of the bags once you get through here. So then we could take the bottles of whiskey and stick them back in the boxes that they came in the first place. But at least we got through it. And one last thing I'll say, comparatively, like I said, with in particular this airport person, when we flew back into the States and we landed in Chicago, O'Hara Airport, the difference in attitude and friendliness between the folks in Edinburgh and the people in Chicago could not be any more different. If I can avoid flying into or out of O'Hare Airport, I will from now on. It was horrible. And I realized there was an extenuating circumstance because the tram system was down there. They're doing some repairs or whatever. And so they had to bus us to our gate, which means we also had to go through airport security again and almost missed our flight. But, tempers were high, from the traveler's point, and the airport folks who were directing us, to the point where there was some misunderstanding with some travelers and the airport folks. And this guy was basically walking behind this family, this man, woman, and 2 daughters. No older than, 14, 15, one of the daughters. And he was screaming at them. Again, I don't know the context, maybe something was going on there, before they arrived there, but I don't know. That doesn't seem right. But anyway, we had a great time in Scotland. I don't want to end on that. It was a fantastic trip. I don't want to say once in a lifetime because we really want to go back. I will say I preferred our trip to Dublin, but that may just be because that was our first international trip like that. But I would go back to either location, but I would definitely go back to Scotland. I would not spend so much time in Edinburgh this time. I would spend more time, maybe in Glasgow or Inverness, other places, but spend more time near the highlands and maybe the islands on the West Coast for sure. So go. You should go. Okay, so that was our first vacation. For some reason, silly reason, that's not silly. We have not had a chance. So that was just the Scottish trip, to Edinburgh, was a trip just for my wife and I. We have our two granddaughters that live with us. They have for the last 11 years. And we haven't had a chance to have a vacation with them for a few years. And so we really wanted to do something with them. And so we had decided earlier on, I can't remember if we had decided that we were going to do this trip that I'm going to talk about next before we had to do this, the Edinburgh trip, before we had to, not lose those miles and take advantage of that. Or if it was kind of all one in the same time. I don't remember. Anyway, we decided that we were going to go take the girls on a little trip. And we had booked some days at on the Oregon coast. But before that, so it all worked out because we ended up going back down to Boise. This is in July, just a few weeks ago at the time of this recording. So we went back down to Boise on a Saturday because we went the Friday before, but it was that Saturday that we went down, or that we were down there for, was for so the two granddaughters that I referred to, those are from our older daughter. Our younger daughter, Brittany, has her own child, Hadley, which I think I've mentioned before. But this was her birthday party that we were going down for. So we spent the weekend in Boise. We went down there, spent Saturday at Hadley's birthday party at Eagle State Park with a barbecue. There was some swimming. And then later we went back to Brittany's house, and they have a little fire pit in their backyard, and we all sat around, a bunch of family sat around just chatting and having a great time. The next day we went rafting on, I always forget the river that's there. Yep, not remembering it. So anyway, we were rafting, and this was class 3 rapids, class 3 and 4 rapids. No. Yes, I think. Anyway, we went rafting together. There was one point where we stopped. They allowed us to stop at this one place where you could climb up these rocks, and if you wanted to, jump down into the water. I've never done something like that before. And so when they offered that, I'm like, I'll go. And I think most of our family members, we were in 2 different rafts, doing this. And, me and Madison, 13-year-old Madison, we did it. And so, I'm helping her climb up these rocks. And these are kind of steep and slippery. Our feet are wet. It's kind of hard to get up there. So I'm helping her, and mostly because I'm concerned that she is going to slip and fall because she's awkward like that. But I'm helping her get up there, and so I'm not really paying attention to how high up we are. And I get Madison up to the top, and it's her turn to jump. And I was so impressed with her because this is a girl who does not like roller coasters. And so I kind of, for some reason, I associate her with not liking to do this kind of stuff. I don't know why. It's not the same thing at all. But so my eyes are focused on her, and I'm so proud of her. She takes that step off and jumps down. I'm like, how did you do that? And then it's my turn. And I step up there, and so there's this guy in a kayak down on the river who is basically telling us when to go because he doesn't want, obviously don't want people just jumping on each other. And so, it's my turn, and he's like, you go ahead. And I'm looking down, and I almost don't do it. Let me explain, gentle listeners. I have a problem with heights. And, even if I watch I just watched a video yesterday of these guys who go out on this plank, and they hang off the plank and then let go, and then they parachute down into this valley. That gave me the emotional response I have when I see stuff like that, is my chest tightens, and my heart starts beating, and that's just watching stuff, on my phone. And so I get up on this rock and I'm looking down, and it's of course taller because to me than what I was thinking it was, because now I'm on top of it and another 6 feet up, my eyes are looking down and I'm thinking, oh my God. But then, so like I said, I hesitated. I took a tiny step forward, like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I stopped. And that's why I say hesitated. And I'm like, I got to do this. I can't not do it. And so then I take this, it's not like this, big Geronimo leap or anything. I take this very tentative step, kind of push off a little bit off the rock and plunge down into this. And so later I asked our raft guide, how high up was that rock? And he said, it's about 25 feet, which isn't much, right? But to me, it was like, holy moly. And then, so then I hit the water, and that water is super cold, and I come back up out of it, and I'm having a hard time catching my breath because of the shock of the cold water. It was, I'm so glad I did it. Like I said, I don't like heights. So to me, this was a big deal. But anyway, so we did that while we were there. Let's see. Oh yeah, I started watching, I'll talk about this later. We had a great time though. So then, the next day, that's our travel day. We had breakfast with Brittany, said goodbye, and then we drove to Newport, Oregon. Lovely Newport, Oregon. Spent a bit of time on the beach. And whenever we've gone to the Oregon coast, Newport has a lot of touristy things. There's the Oregon Coast Aquarium that's there. They've got the bay. I don't know. It's kind of, to us, it's kind of a central hub. It's great beaches there. So there's some shopping that you can do. So, we've gone there a few times over the years. I think we've been there now, 5 or 6 times, over the years. So we enjoy it. But the next day, my wife really wanted to go to Tillamook, the Tillamook Cheese Factory. If you've ever heard of that, you can go and you can see how they make their cheese and how they're doing stuff there. But, we've always enjoyed going there. And you can sample cheese too, if you like. But, we've gone there many times in the past. I think every time we've gone to the coast, we've gone there. But I think this is my last time ever wanting to go there, because they made some changes recently, and it's now like this really, it's a bit of a tourist trap, and it's very expensive stuff that's there. So I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, if you've never been to Tillamook, you might want to go there. But if you've ever been before, I wouldn't recommend going back for sure. There's actually a place down the road I think it's called Blue Heron, which they don't make cheese there, I don't think. But yeah, it's not that. They have this little animal petting area where you can buy some food, grains and stuff for the animals and feed them. The kids love that. And their store, I think, is just a lot better. But if you're actually going to buy stuff like that. But, on the way to and from Tillamook, we were able to kind of stop and see the sights. We stopped at various viewpoints along the way and took a lot of pictures. Speaking of, I mentioned the weather in Scotland. We had beautiful weather here on the coast. Normally when we go there's at least one day that is just all rain, and usually 2. And we had very, very little rain, less rain than we had that day in Edinburgh. So, wonderful, both vacations, wonderful, sunny, beautiful weather day, vacations. So, we had a good time. On Wednesday, we went to, it's called Yaquina Head. There's a lighthouse there. There's also these tide pools. So when the tide goes out, there's this area that you could go down and see the sea life, plant and animals that are there. There's some seals or not seals. The other one. I'm totally blanking what those are. Not seals. They are, anyway, the other things that are not seals. God. Oh, my memory. Did I mention I was 50? Anyway, so and whales. There were whales. There be whales there, Captain. We saw many whales out there. That's where they were feeding during this time of year. So that was really cool. There were 4, maybe 5 whales out there that day. So that was kind of neat to see. And then we went to, I mentioned the Oregon Coast Aquarium. The girls really love that place. I never have to go back. But I was able to take some video. There's this little tunnel, which, you can walk through, and it's 360 degrees where you can see the water area around you. And in that area, there are sharks, various sharks. And, I took video of that because our granddaughter Hadley is in love with that Baby Shark song. And so I took that video and sent it to my daughter to show her daughter. Anyway, that night, we went to, there's this place called Nana's Irish Pub that we've been to many times before. It is run by, these women from Ireland. So it is an authentic Irish pub. And I can say that because I've actually been to Irish pubs, but we went there for dinner, and that was really nice. I got my Irish pub fix, which is always lovely. And then the next day we went back to Yaquina Head because you can tour the lighthouse there, but the day that we went out to Yaquina Head, all of the tours were booked. They only do so many tours, they only allow so many people a day. And those slots fill up very quickly. So, like I said, the girls, Kitra really wanted to go tour the lighthouse. I was like, meh, I've been to a lighthouse. Once you see one, you've seen them all. But it was still cool. I'm glad we did go because we did, again, kind of like, in Edinburgh, we had a tour guide, and she was dressed like someone who was, in the early 1900s. Well, yeah, more or less, who would, the 19 teens, I think it was I think that's the time period, maybe the 1920s, that we're talking about. And, but she was describing what it was like to live and work at this lighthouse on the Oregon coast. So that was really cool. So, similar to our underground tour in Edinburgh. But, so we got there. We were the first people in line waiting for the facility to open up so that we could get on the list, to tour the lighthouse. And we ended up being on the first tour, which was great. So we ended up doing that. Then we went a little further south of that, and there's another place called Yaquina Bay, where there was this other lighthouse, but we didn't bother with that lighthouse because it's not as historical and interesting looking. But we ended up walking on the beach and walking out on this jetty, which was kind of neat. But it was a lot of walking. And then the next day we went back to Boise because we were celebrating Kitra's birthday with our daughter. So, because like I said, her birthday is coming up here as I record this in just a few days. So that's basically the highlights of the things that we did on our vacations. I will also mention that we did bring games with us to play. We brought 3 or 4 different games. Most of them were card-based games, and we ended up playing only one of these games, which was the DC Superheroes collectible card game, which I just often refer to in a short fashion as the DC card game. But we played that game every night while we were out there on the coast. And I think, we actually played it the Friday. It was either Friday or Saturday night. It was Saturday night because that's what Kitra wanted to do for her, because it's her birthday celebration day with our daughter. We ended up playing that as well with Brittany and her husband. So I don't know if you've never played the DC collectible card game. I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And it's rare that there's a game that all of us like to play. And by all of us, I mean me, my wife, and our 2 granddaughters that live with us, Maddie and Gabby. They really liked playing that game. And so it was awesome. And we even talked about how we should do this once a week. So we'll see if we actually follow through with that. But it was good. We had a lot of time, a really good time. Other things I did during this time period, while we were traveling to and from Boise, I read a bunch. I brought my iPad and I read a bunch of comics through the DC Universe app, which, given the number of comics I read, which was 12 issues of Hero, the 2003 Will Pfeiffer and Kano series, which was talked about on the DC All-Stars podcast, which led me to go and reread and read more of, because I read, I think, my buddy Travis, Oddfellow's Thoughts, let me read the first 6 issues of Hero back in the day, and I remember enjoying it. But I read 12 issues of it because Peter Rios and the DC All Stars folks got together and were talking about that series. So that was fresh in my mind. So I downloaded those and read them. And I might talk about these more in depth on a regular episode of the Long Box Review podcast. So, maybe look for that in the future. I also read Hawkworld, the 1989 Tim Truman and Enrique Alcatena series, miniseries, which, wow, I've always heard that was good. It was. So I recommend that, especially if you're a Hawkman fan. I also read the first 6 issues of the 1983 Omega Men series because I did not realize this, but Keith Giffen drew those first 6 issues. And I think he also co-plotted those. Anyway, Roger Sliffer and Mike DiCarlo were involved with that as well. I also read, because there's a few people I follow on Twitter some months ago. They were talking about, I'll just say, maybe dissing the 1984 Superpowers miniseries by Jack Kirby. Joey Cavallari and Adrian Gonzalez worked on that. So I never read it. I had never read it. So, based on their comments about it, I'm like, I need to read this. So I did. And now I agree with them. What a mess. But at least with the last issue, Jack Kirby drew it. So you got to see that. And then finally, I also read, the Riley Rosmo, illustrated Batman Shadow miniseries from 2017. This was in partnership with Dynamite Comics. I think Scott Snyder and Steve Orlando. One of those Orlandos. They co-wrote this together. But I only read it because of Riley Rosmo's art. Basically anything that guy produces, I will get. So I quite enjoyed that. So those are the comics I read. Other things, as I normally do, I talk about other media things that I have consumed, and that I may recommend as well, during these, Gutters audio journal episodes. I actually bought this book, Ray Bradbury's The Illustrated Man. I bought it before we went to Scotland, intending on bringing it with me. I ended up bringing a different book, the Dick Grayson Boy Wonder book. It's a book about a bunch of essays by various people discussing and celebrating Dick Grayson. So I brought that and started reading it. But what I did bring The Illustrated Man with me to our trip to the coast, and did read a little bit of it on one of the drives. I think maybe out as we were driving out to the coast. However, since then I've had the book on my nightstand and have been reading it in the evenings before I go to sleep, and I've been enjoying that greatly. I have not read much of Bradbury, despite the fact that I used to read a ton of science fiction when I was younger. And I remember watching the Martian Chronicles. They did a movie or a TV miniseries or something. I think it was a TV miniseries that I watched. I remember enjoying, but I'm enjoying this. boy, it's different seeing how science fiction, Bradbury is telling these science fiction tales through the lens of the time period in which these were published. So I think these are 50s, 60s. I'll have to go look, but it's very interesting and kind of inspiring. I kind of want to write some 50s/60s inspired sci-fi stories now. So we'll see. So that's all the reading. Things I've been watching. It's summertime, so I need to, as I always have for the last several years anyway, I've been watching So You Think You Can Dance on Fox because I love those dance shows. I think we're all caught up with maybe there's one more that we have to watch to get caught up with where they're at with it. Because of all of our travels and other things that we've been doing, I can't watch them live, so I end up having to watch them like a week later or so. Similarly, our family really likes Stranger Things on Netflix, and I think this third season dropped before we went to Scotland, or maybe it was just after we got back. I don't remember when it dropped, but anyway, we started watching that at some point, and then here in the last week, after we got back from the coast, the family and I sat down and watched the rest of Stranger Things. I think we'd watched maybe 2 episodes before the coast trip, and then we finished off the rest of them during that last week. Was it last week? Last week. Yeah. Or so. Anyway, we really like Stranger Things, especially that first season. All of us kind of agree that it's getting a bit stretched thin now in the third season, and if they do a fourth season, I don't know. I don't know that I want to watch another season of this show. So we'll see. And then finally, the wonderful TV show Veronica Mars has returned. This was a 3-season show that I watched several years ago, and my daughter Brittany and I got into it together, and so we were very excited when it was announced that Veronica Mars was returning, this time to Hulu, for a 4th season with all the principal cast and some returning favorites. It's an 8-episode season, and after we returned from the coast, I think. No, this was the weekend before we went to the coast. So that Sunday night that I was telling you about where we went rafting, that night, Brittany and I watched the first episode or 2. I think it was 2 episodes of Veronica Mars. And so once we got done with Stranger Things last week, I have been watching, actually the last couple nights, Veronica Mars. And now I have watched 6 episodes of the 8, and I've heard from my daughter, among other people on Twitter, that it sounds like I'm not going to like the ending of this series, this season of Veronica Mars. But it's certainly nice to see Kristen Bell back in that role, even if I don't care for some of the choices her character is making in the show. But we'll see. Maybe I'll touch back on that again in a future Gutters episode when I have had time to watch the last 2 and have been able to digest it. Okay. Boy, this is a long one. So if you've stuck around for this, I thank you. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me about anything that I've talked about, if you'd like some more tips or recommendations about traveling to Edinburgh or just kind of travel internationally in general, be glad to offer you what little I know. And then also same for, if you've never been to the Oregon coast, boy, I recommend it. It's beautiful there. Some of the most beautiful country that I've ever encountered. Of course, I haven't traveled a whole lot, so take that for what you will, but I really like it there. Anyway, so you can always send those to me. Email them to me, longboxreview@gmail.com. And I guess that's it. Like I said, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.